Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Rich Allen and Jeremy Smith. 6 more Ligue 1 weekends to go, but everything is just coming to temperature. But who's cooking with heat and who's still defrosting? All of that after your latest headlines. Saint-Etienne almost pulled off the greatest upset on Friday night as they were moments away from handing Paris Saint-Germain what would have been only the third defeat this season. Rami Cabella gave the hosts an early lead and Presnel Kimpembe's red card only helped matters, only for the goalscorer to miss from the spot and then for Matteo Debuchy to put past his own goalkeeper in added time as the champions-elect had to settle for a 1-1 draw. On Saturday, Monaco cut the gap to the table toppers to a mere 14 points as they came from behind against Nantes to win 2-1 at the Stade Louis II, with Ronnie Lopez scoring his 10th goal of 2018, more than any other Ligue 1 player. Adrian Thomason gave Le Canary the lead, but that goal from Lopez and Radamel Falcao strike helped the Principality club remain unbeaten in Ligue 1 as well since November 26th. In the multiplex, Amiens took one giant leap to Ligue 1 safety as they defeated Caen 3-0. Goals from Bakaye Dibassi, Serge Gakpe and Moussa Konate helped these home side 7 points clear, while simultaneously putting their visitors closer to the relegation trapdoor. Elsewhere, 4 of the other teams in trouble failed to pick up 3 points to ease their own plights. Strasbourg will be somewhat satisfied with their point at Angers with a 1-1 scoreline, especially after Karl Toko Ekambi's goal in the final moments was ruled out that would have given the home side all 3 points. But there will be worries building in Toulouse, who let Dijon sneak away with a 1-0 victory, the worst away side in Ligue 1, nicking a vital 3 points. Lille would be kicking themselves as well as they let a goal lead slip at Bordeaux, who won 2-1, while Troyes continue to sink in the quicksand as their 4-0 loss to Guingamp means they haven't won in their last 7 outings, scoring just once in that period. On Sunday, Rennes maintained their command of 5th with a 1-1 draw at Nice. The Brittany club are now in the driving seat with several teams only a few points behind them. Lyon moved up to 3rd as they thumped doomed Metz 5-0, a surprise double from Marcelo, and 4 assists and a goal from Memphis Depay helped rubber stamp their 4th league win in a row. That was allowed to happen because Marseille could only manage a goalless draw against Montpellier. The home side may have cause for anger as they should have had a penalty for a foul on Kostas Mitroglou, and this time it was maybe a little bit legitimate in the second half, but now are trailing Legon on goal difference. And in off-the-pitch news, all of us in the Get French Football family would like to send our thoughts to the families and friends of both 18-year-old Le Havre defender Samba Diop and 12-year-old Guingamp youth player Baptiste Le Foll, who tragically lost their lives this past few weeks. May they rest in peace. And that's all for now. But for all your latest news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start with this week with that game on Friday and an almost incredible result for Saint-Etienne, who have been terrific recently, but were really, really terrific in this one. I was thinking, as I was writing the script for this one today, Rich, that in all honesty, I don't think, other than maybe that first Lyon game this season, I don't think there's been a team that's played better against Paris Saint-Germain and been more dominant in Ligue 1 at least terms, and in fairness, really, in the Champions League than Saint-Etienne were on Friday night.
I'd probably go one step further and say I haven't seen any team in be it Lyon's first half or not. I think that was a terrific 91 minutes of football from Saint-Etienne. It was exactly how you should go after this PSG team. They were unafraid. They were willing to attack. They weren't just going to sit back and accept that defeat seemed an inevitability. I mean, we know Saint-Etienne have been on a good run of form lately, but I was perhaps surprised at just how well they played in this game. And it's a real shame that they're going to be left kicking themselves because push comes to shove, they do only have themselves to blame for not taking all 3 points. They got that early lead through Remy Cabella, who's hitting a little bit of hot form at a good time for Saint-Etienne. Missed that penalty, which was very unfortunate. I think he's tucked away a couple of late, so you'd have banked a decent amount of money on him scoring that. Helps with Kimpembe's red card, who had an absolutely awful first half. I mean, he wasn't alone, but it was a really, really poor first half from Kimpembe, who had a chance to sort of stake a claim to be the number 2 behind Thiago Silva and didn't really take it. And in the second half, again, I think PSG upped the ante a little bit more and were a little bit more of a threat. But we saw Oussama Tanan. He hit the crossbar. I think actually Ariola, he got a little touch on that, I think, if I remember rightly. And then of course we come to Cavani's miss. Di Maria is through in on goal. Unselfishly for him, lays it across to Cavani. I mean, we've all seen it now. Open goal. I mean, to say that he was under a little bit of pressure from the defender is doing an absolute overstatement there, because really the defender's not anywhere near him, but he's in a screenshot. Let's Cavani that. And I mean, he could have taken a touch. He could have taken 3 or 4 touches. Goes for it first time, lets the ball come across him, and expertly guides it out of play for a goal kick. It was one of those moments. I think it was Robbie Thompson who was on the world feed. If you listen back to his commentary, he's as perplexed as anybody how Cavani has missed that, because we joke about Cavani needing all these chances to score. I've not really seen him miss one like that before. That's a new level of missing an easy chance. It was an absolutely appalling, and it summed up PSG's night. And then it's just so lucky, because with that last, he pretty much was the last kick of the game, or knee of the game. Cross comes in. I think Mbappe jumps just in front of Debuchy. Mbappe misses it, and there's nothing Debuchy can do. It hits his knee and goes past Ruffier, who up until then had been excellent. And that was it. An incredibly fortunate draw for PSG. Incredibly unfortunate for Saint-Etienne not to take 3 points, but a really, really, for those 91 minutes, except for that final minute, a really, really positive performance from Saint-Etienne.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were some terrific players in that game as well, and you mentioned how good they really were there, Richard. But one man who, unfortunately, the headlines will be a little bit depressing, because he obviously was involved in that final goal, Jeremy. But it was Mathieu Debuchy, who was really, really superb, especially in the first half. I mean, a lot of English audiences will think, are they going mad? Thinking of both his time at Arsenal, especially in the latter half at least, and obviously his loan spell at Bordeaux last season wasn't the perfect ending for him really at that place, but he's been excellent for Saint-Etienne in a performance here that really, really must be knocking on the door of Didier Deschamps, because if he can play at this kind of level, he is probably absolutely up there with the best right backs in France.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he doesn't have too much competition, because I think it's definitely France's weakest position, but he's had a fantastic 2018, as most of Saint-Etienne have, and a lot of it is down to sort of the defensive stability that he's added, but also the sort of attacking impetus. And he was pretty unlucky on Friday night, but it was his cross who led to the Saint-Etienne goal. So just on a personal level, his sort of debit and credit sort of balance out. But yeah, overall this year he's been really good. I mean, I can't say that I watch Arsenal week in, week out, but I always thought it was a little bit harsh. I mean, it started off with injuries, I think, but I thought it was a bit unfortunate that he was sort of so quickly discarded. and I think he is showing his worth now. And I think there's a sort of growing sort of bank of support behind him, suggesting that he should be in the World Cup squad. I think it was I can't remember if it was Dugarry or Didier Roustan. It might even have been both of them, sort of suggesting what their squad would be, and both of them said they'd have him, just because with it being a dodgy position, they think maybe a bit of hardiness and a bit of experience might be better than someone completely new in that position as backup to Sidibe. And yeah, based on this year's form, he definitely deserves it. And I can't think of anyone else who could really claim to be hard done by if they lost out, or if he sort of came in at their expense.
No, absolutely. He's really in that, and the praise he's getting is absolutely deserved, because he was terrific, as was Cabella, who's sort of on his own sort of renaissance mission. And I'm sure Saint-Etienne, if not more clubs in Ligue 1, will be possibly discussing with Marseille in the summer if they can take him off their hands, because whether he really fits into their mould as well is the scenario. But he's been excellent in 2018. They look so much better recently, with more vigour, and Sailness is playing great in the midfield, intercepting play and breaking up things and quickly changing those to attacks. Hamuma all of a sudden seems to have an extra burst of energy now, and obviously he was involved in the eventual second yellow for Presnel Kimpembe as well, that saw him gain red. But let's talk about that PSG defence as well, because that was a real, well, in a way, of a highlight of showing that they absolutely still have some weaknesses in Paris, and it's quite clearly still not just that midfield that kept losing the ball in the first half and in the start of the second as well, that they almost had to sort of cut them out to try and get attacks in. But time after time, Rich, they were attacked with speed, with pace. There was a chance for Tanan as well, who hit the bar. There was another Cabella one. Obviously, he missed the penalty as well. They looked shaky all night. That some might argue that Thiago Silva not being there and being at least a steady head, really, more than anything, with Marquinhos falling to sleep on the goal, with Kimpembe obviously losing his will, having given away a penalty, and then sort of stamping a little bit on Hamuma, although the stamp part might be accidental, but it's a foul from behind and a definite yellow. That's an area they need to address in the summer, because the thinking is as well is if one or two of those got injured, if Kimpembe got injured and say Thiago Silva was out or suspended, they don't have another option there. They need someone there, and that's somewhere they surely should be looking in the summer.
Absolutely. I think the reports during the week have been that, or across the weekend, coming into the start of this week, have been that the PSG have identified 3 areas that they want to recruit and improve their options: goalkeeper, left back, defensive midfield. I think you could probably add right back to that. I think you could probably add at least one other centre back to that, maybe even another midfielder to that, because I think there's certainly a need for a little bit more creativity, maybe from midfield. I don't necessarily mean like full out attacking, because obviously they've got the options there, but someone who can link that defence and attack a little bit better than one or two of those players have shown over the past 2 years. Yeah, I mean, you look at Kurzawa as the sort of, I don't want to pick on him, but he's the one that you sort of focus at and use as an example of just how far they have fallen. We turn back the clock 3 or 4, maybe even longer years ago, when he was that really exciting attacking left back with Monaco, got his move to PSG, and he's not kicked on. And the fact that now PSG are coming out and saying that left back is an area we want to look at recruiting in, you've got to imagine that it's one of him or Bashisha who's off. He's lost his place in the French squad. What needs to happen for Kurzawa? And my thoughts are, maybe he does need to get out of PSG. Maybe he needs to get back to playing. Maybe he needs to get back to almost have a bit of a reality check. I think he's sort of cruised through his time in the capital. I don't think he's been particularly challenged. Don't think he's been particularly pushed. Don't think he's been particularly well coached to try and eke out some of those attitude issues that we'd seen with the under-21s. We know what PSG are like with giving homegrown youngsters an opportunity. Chances for those are extremely limited. I look at Kimpembe, a needless performance. We know he's a good defender. He's performed on the biggest of stages. I only want to put that performance down to, as with a lot of these PSG players, their minds aren't in it anymore. They've got the league wrapped up. They know they've got the league wrapped up. They know they've got one domestic trophy. They know they're almost certainly going to get a second domestic cup trophy, cup win. They haven't achieved their prime goal of Champions League. So as far as they're concerned, they're on holiday now. As cliched as it is, they are on the beach. I think that's a very foolish attitude to take. Certainly for players like, go back to Kurzawa, use him as an example again, but there are a number of players there who I don't think have performed now for quite a while. I think you could make a case. Jez may argue differently, but I don't think 2018 has been a very good year for Rabiot. I think there's attributes that we're seeing that we thought had sort of come out of his game. Again, sort of attitude based on how he addresses the game that I don't like to see. It certainly doesn't mean that you get the best from him as a player. So there's one or two of those players who should be taking this opportunity to sort of stake a claim that, it's looking almost certainly that Emery will be off at the end of the season. Whoever this new manager is, and whether it's Thomas Tuchel or whoever it is going to already be looking at this PSG squad. He already, that new coach will already be looking at this squad, thinking, who do I want for next season? So the fact that some of these players aren't cottoning on to that and thinking, actually, you know what, I'm going to look even better because there's other players who know that they're going to be secure next season and are not going to put in their best performances. You look at someone like, I suppose you could make a claim for Rabiot, but, you could make a claim for someone like, Marquinhos. He knows he's going to be there next season. I don't think he's playing particularly well at the moment. But if someone like Kurzawa recognises, well, actually, you know what? I've got teammates who aren't going to be playing at the top of their game. If I really put in the effort, that's going to be noticeable. That new coach will see that, and that's going to be an immediate plus point for when they come into the club in the summer. So I think it just needs a lot. Some of these players just need to have a think. They've obviously got their short-term heads on at the minute of thinking there's nothing more to play for this season. They need to think longer term because there's a lot of those players there who that new manager comes in, there's big question marks over their future at the club.
I think it's a sort of a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I mean, we've sort of flippantly said it for a few years now, but it feels more true this year than ever before that, the season comes down to one or two matches in March, April time. It really felt that way after the defeat to Real Madrid, or certainly that the season is over from then. And yeah, as Rich said, that they all seem mentally on the beach. And I don't know if the reason they're not kicking on is because they've got the kind of players who have got this sort of Kurzawa, Rabiot attitude of picking their games and completely switching off mentally, or the fact that they only have these one or two games a season kind of encourage that kind of attitude in the players. But either way, something needs to change. And I mean, I agree with Rich. I've said before, I think Rabiot the last few years has been one of PSG's better players and more consistent performers, especially in the big matches. But this year, in the three matches that really counted, well, the two matches that really counted for PSG, and then the last France match, he didn't turn up at all. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if that cost him his place in the World Cup. But there needs to be an overhaul. And again, I don't know if the tone is set higher up because I've still got a nagging feeling that it's not necessarily Emery picking the team half the time. So certain players know that they'll be in the starting lineup for the big matches, whatever they do or however they perform. There's players who set a poor tone, As good as Saint-Etienne were on Friday, PSG just weren't interested, and Cavani isn't the type of player that I would normally put in that bracket. And I know he just come on as sub. He didn't start the match, but even that miss, as much as I sort of make fun of him, and he does come up with the odd ricket or howler. That one, even by his standards, was pretty poor. And you wonder if it's just the fact that they've all completely checked out. I mean, face it, that after the Real Madrid match, the only big matches they had left were the Coupe de la Ligue final, and I suppose at a push the Coupe de France semi-final. But you'd expect them to pretty easily beat Caen, and then in the final they've got an amateur team to play. So arguably this match away to Saint-Etienne at the Geoffrey Guichard was the next biggest match, and you'd have expected them to at least sort of wake up or get into maybe second gear for that, and they just weren't interested. And it is understandable, their season is over, and they don't have their current manager to play for, but for all the reasons that Rich said, they should be playing for the next manager, they should be playing for their professional pride, they should be playing for their place next season, they should be playing for their international places, either to retain the ones that they've already got or to sort of push into their respective squads or make sure that they remain in the squads, and they're not doing that. And as I said, I don't know if that attitude is why they haven't progressed further in Europe, or the fact that their season boils down to 1 or 2 European games makes them those type of players. But either way, you'd want them at least after the Real Madrid matches to show, okay, they were 2 tough matches. To be fair, we did turn up in the first match, and we just mucked up the last 5 minutes or so. We didn't turn up in the second, but let's show that we are a decent team. Rabiot was right. We're not going to win it. It's all very well beating Dijon 8-0, but for the rest of the season, let's really put out a statement to the rest of Europe. We're angry. We're going to win every match. Obviously not 8-0, but we're capable of winning every match easily. We're going to do that, and we're going to really build some momentum and some attitude and a bit of an aura for next year's European competition. If anything, that they're even more of a laughing stock now than they were when they went out so limply to Real.
Yeah, they just sort of wasn't really any kind of verve to them at the weekend. Mbappe struggled to get into the game. Di Maria had a couple of moments, but they couldn't get those attacking players in the game often enough. And so credit to Saint-Etienne to force them to do that. But at the same time, PSG have no excuses about not performing a lot better than they really should have done. And you briefly touched on it there, Rich, and it's the news I want to pick up on very quickly before we move on, and that's Thomas Tuchel, who's been heavily linked with Paris Saint-Germain now. A lot of German newspapers are saying that something has already been agreed with the former Dortmund coach. He's one of many names that's still linked with a post with Antonio Conte, a big favourite as well, especially across English media. They think that that's his next step, and there's also talk of Luis Enrique as well, still possibly in the pipeline. But let's focus on the German. Tuchel obviously did a lot good for Dortmund, but at the same time fell out with the board there because he couldn't really keep players and do something like that. That's obviously something that might happen a lot easier at Paris Saint-Germain. But is he the right man to lead them forward?
Well, that's my concern. Is he's had issues with a previous board over outgoing transfers. He's going to face a similar problem at PSG with regards to incoming transfers, unless something changes and they give him assurances that, he does have control over who the club brings in, and El Khelaïfi won't get involved because it's obvious he has been, certainly in the Emery era at PSG, with regards to transfers. If Tuchel can be given those assurances, I mean, it's another... I just fear it's another Emery appointment, in so much as, they go out and get these big name players who sort of been there, done that at various levels, and you feel that they if they really want to get this Champions League win, maybe they need to do the same with their manager. You know, maybe someone like Conte would be a slightly better choice. You know, I think Conte would be, if I was from the outside looking into PSG, Conte would be my choice. I think the fact that he is pretty clear in that he's unafraid to ruffle players' feathers will probably count against him for taking the PSG job, because, you know, it's so obvious how much power the likes of Thiago Silva, Thiago Motta, probably Neymar now, how much power they hold within the dressing room and probably beyond at that club. They're not going to want someone like Conte coming in and giving them what for if they fail to perform, because, you know, we see that happen in Ligue, and those big players do fail to perform. You know, they're not going to want Conte coming in and giving them a rollicking at half-time or full-time. They're going to want a slightly easier run. Now, whether Tuchel is that easier run or not, I don't know. There's, you know, he doesn't strike me as the kind of man who will just bow down and let, you know, sort of player power take over. But as with Emery, you know, they want to win these Champions League games. They want to, you know, they want to progress. They want to win the tournament. And I just feel that Tuchel, as good a manager as he is, because I still maintain Emery is a good, you know, he's a good coach. They don't necessarily have the quality to take this. They might have a qualities at other clubs to take them to where PSG want to go. But I think what PSG wants and how they want to achieve it's a case of they're trying to force two different methods together. They're trying to force the glamorous, you know, almost Galacticos Mark 2 or 3, whatever we're on now, but then with a sort of pragmatic, sensible, down-to-earth manager. And I just don't think the two of them work together to achieve that common goal that PSG wants. So, you know, I want to see Tuchel succeed because, you know, I think he did decent things with Dortmund, and I think he perhaps left that sort of project a little earlier than he would have wanted and the club would have wanted. But for whatever behind the scenes goings on happened, that did happen. So he is a good coach. You know, many other European teams have been after him. But I just fear that I'd like to make sure from his own benefit that it's been made clear to him what duties he will have, because, as I say, from the outset looking in, it just strikes me as another Emery type appointment.
I couldn't agree more with any of that. I think for me, if not Pochettino, who's obviously not leaving, Conte would definitely be the right man for the job, just for the reasons Rich said, because he is the type that will shake things up, won't stand for nonsense, and I think for exactly that reason he won't get the job. And as much as I like Tuchel, as much as I think he's a good tactician, which may help in the latter stages of European competitions, I'm just, you know, you look at his records and, all right, Augsburg, Mainz, and then a couple of years at Dortmund, but, you know, honours one domestic cup. And I don't think Neymar and Thiago Silva and Thiago Motta are the type that are going to look at that and think, yeah, that's the person, you know, that's the man for me, that's the man I'm going to follow and whose instructions I'm going to follow. I also wish him a lot of good, a lot of well at PSG, but I'm not convinced about that appointment whatsoever. I don't.
Jez is right.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. I was going to say you're absolutely right. In Pochettino is the man to go for. You know, if they are to be doing what they want to do, you know, he's the man they need to bring in, and they need to go after him. You know, sort of all guns blazing, as they would do with a star player. You know, they need to be going in there and bombarding him because he is the coach they need. You know, he's got links to the club. Obviously, it's a very different club than he will have remembered, but he's got links to the club. He's got that right balance of you know, a great tactician, but, you know, unafraid to put a little bit of discipline there, but perhaps not to the extent of Conte, which might frighten the sort of PSG hierarchy. And again, Jez is right. You know, it's going to prove a very, very difficult, to the point it's almost going to be now and impossible, because he seems set to continue with Spurs. But that's who they should be making a play for without a shadow of a doubt.
And also, as Rich said, Tuchel left Dortmund because of intrusion from above. He's absolutely gonna get that at PSG, unless El Khalifi says, "You know what? I've learned from the couple of years. I'm taking a step back, and I'm not getting involved in the sporting side at all." But I just can't believe that's going to happen.
Yes, it's hard to imagine, isn't it? That's why I think someone like Luis Enrique as well, if Pochettino's not an option, maybe feels more like the middle option that doesn't sort of unrock the boat of the players too much, but at the same time offers the tactical flexibility and the know-how of winning things, as he did with very successfully with Barcelona, obviously. But we still wait and see who decides to take on the mantle this summer, when we see very likely, at least anyway, that Unai Emery was to leave. But let's move on to the fight just below, really, Paris Saint-Germain and obviously Monaco for that third place, because Lyon ended up overtaking Marseille at the weekend thanks to their 5-0 win at Metz. And Marseille's 0-0 draw at home to Montpellier, which means that Les Gaulois are now above their opponents on goal difference. And we'll start with the team that now lie in fourth in Marseille. And Rich, it wasn't the greatest of games, and that's maybe putting it a tad lightly, really. But at the same time, they'll feel a little bit aggrieved that maybe they should have had a penalty on Kostas Mitroglou. In fact, probably almost certainly. But when isn't there a week by where Marseille fans feel like they should have had a penalty in a football game? But at the same time, with them being a little bit unlucky in a decision like that, is that strike force and the lack of goals that they're having when Payet isn't on form, when Thauvin isn't on form, coming back to bite them?
To touch on the penalty, because I've had toons and fro-ins with a couple of Marseille fans over the last few weeks. I'm under no illusions that last night was a penalty. You watch replay after replay, you watch it in real time, you watch it in slow motion. It's a penalty. I have no problem in admitting that. Simultaneously, of course, that first penalty 2 weeks ago against Dijon that resulted in the red card to, I can't remember the player it was not a penalty. Absolutely not a penalty. You watch it in real time, you watch it in slow motion. The ball was taken, clean tackle, shouldn't have been given. So, it happens. Marseille fans seem to think it happens to them more than any other team. But, I'm a Rennes fan. I think it happens to Rennes more than any other team. You ask Jez, he'll feel the same. Any supporter of their team is going to feel like, oh, you know what, we don't get the rub of the decisions.
Remember, they got that penalty in the first match against Montpellier as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the one that was it Mandanda that sort of appealed for, was eventually given, wasn't it? Yeah. It just happens. It happens with every team. You just build up a complex. It's completely natural. But it just seems that a lot of Marseille fans seem to be a little bit more vocal about it. But last night that was a clear penalty. I'd probably go back to a tweet I put out just before the transfer window opened in January, so end of December. And I said, Marseille, going into this transfer window, they need to sign a right back, they probably need to sign at least 2 centre-backs, and they need to sign a striker, a good striker. If they can sign all 4 of those players, you know what, they could, at that point, they were still in the fight for second. They could probably, make a really, really, really strong case for continuing that push, and they'd still be in that fight now. What happened was they didn't recruit a right back. They didn't recruit centre-backs. They brought in Kostas Mitroglou. And I'm afraid this is what happens when you don't recruit sensibly. They brought in, last January transfer window, 2017, they brought in 4 players. I mean, 2 were a little bit ropey, 2 were excellent signings. There's no reason why they couldn't have brought in 4 good players. It might not be the players that they want for the long term, but they could have brought in 4 solid, good players to plug those clear and obvious gaps in that side, to continue their excellent form in the first half of the season. They didn't, and now they're in 4th. There's a clear and direct link between not recruiting properly in January and a complete loss in form. They haven't played great football all year, I don't think. They've just been they've just been, be it luck, be it sheer doggedness from their part, they've ground out results. What they're now finding is that after by not recruiting properly in January, a few injuries later, we're in a position where it's a threadbare 11. They're having to play, incredibly inexperienced players at centre back. They're having to play defensive midfielders at centre back. They've relative success, I suppose, converted Bouna Sarr to an almost okay right back. But this shouldn't be happening to this team. It really shouldn't be happening to this team. You can't predict injuries. Of course you can't. But you can recruit. You can still recruit better. They should have seen that the defenders they had were not good enough, fit or not fit. They're Rolando, not good enough. Rami, not good enough. Abdenor, they're not playing him at the minute in case they're fearful that they trigger some deal that they've got in his contract that they have to then sign him permanently. He's only on loan, I think. They have to sign him permanently if he plays more than 13 games. And Gregory Sertic, it's not good enough. They should have seen those clear gaps in January and should have recruited to put that right. And the panic buy that was Kostas Mitroglou, yes, of late he's cropped up with a couple of pretty important goals, but the return is still nowhere near good enough and nowhere near the levels that they need, because Saint-Germain just isn't, the way that Marseille play with one up front. Saint-Germain isn't that sole striker. He was at his best with Monaco when he was playing alongside Falcao, or playing alongside Mbappe, or playing alongside someone. He was at his best. The same with Nice when he was on loan there. He's not going to be a target man. He's not going to be a man who can bang in the goals if it's just him up front. So they brought in Mitroglou, who was supposed to be that. He can't hit a barn door. He really can't. He's just not good enough. You look at the players that they were linked with at the start of that January transfer window. There was Olivier Giroud. He would have done a brilliant job for these 6 months if they could have brought him on loan. They were linked with Moussa Dembele at Celtic. He'd have been an excellent investment for now and long term, but they didn't. They got to the end of the transfer window, realised that they need a striker, and they've gone out and bought whichever striker was willing to sign a contract for. In fact, it was actually a decent chunk of money, I think, wasn't it, for Mitroglou?
Yeah, it was
13, 14 million, something like that.
Yeah,
so the fact they ended up with him, it was a panic buy that's not come to fruition, and by not addressing any of those issues properly, fourth place, which it's at the minute it's likely because that's where they're at. And it's going to be a season where it's a complete missed opportunity.
Yeah, and that's the strange thing at the same time, because you would have told a lot of our OM fans that they would have taken fourth at the start of the season. They maybe would have grabbed your hand and chopped it off. But at the same time, you feel like the season that they've had and the run they went on, sort of to start the second half of the season, at least anyway, that they should really be in the driving seat, because the disappointment, Jez, is that Lyon are above them. They have a good, strong 7+ goal difference on them, which was certainly helped by, well, obviously the unfortunate demolishing of your own team, really. But at the same time, Lyon were really good. That Marcelo scored 2 nice goals, but Memphis Depay was really influential in getting all those goals. But at the same time, you start looking at their running as well. Amiens, Dijon, Nantes, Troyes, Strasbourg, Nice. A couple of weeks ago, if we would have told you that Lyon had this chance to grab third, you would have said no after that run of 6 games without win. But 4 wins on the trot, a little bit of a slip up from Marseille, a win obviously against them a couple of weeks ago, and they're right back in it.
Yeah, I think despite the horrific form they were in, I think it all came down to that Marseille game. If they'd lost that, I think it would have been over. I think Marseille would have had enough of a cushion. Having won that, even though they were still a bit behind, I think that gave them a lot more impetus. And Marseille were already looking a little bit tired. I mean, I still think that on paper it's a good Marseille team. I think it's lopsided in that attacking wise it's a hell of a lot better than defensively, Mandanda and Luis Gustavo aside. The problem is it's just the team, it's not the squad. And I agree with Rich about how Chairman's being used completely wrongly. But because they're not able to chop and change much, and obviously they've got the fact that they're still in Europe, so that they've got a couple of extra matches to play. I think it's really starting to show. Gustavo, I just think, has been a complete hero. And, even this week playing in centre back, I thought he played very well. But he sort of looked back to his better self this weekend. But there's been a couple of recent matches where he's looked tired. Tauvin's kind of run himself into the ground for Marseille. Payet looks fresh because he's done bugger all until the last month or so when he's remembered there's a World Cup on its way, but he was poor at the weekend. And yeah, it was absolutely a penalty, but I think Maxime Lopez probably put it rightly when he said we shouldn't have had to rely on that. So I think probably I think the run-in's relatively similar. I know Marseille's still got Nice, but I'd say that Lyon are favourites now just because they look a bit fresher. They've got Fekir to come back in, who'd have had a few weeks off, against Metz, who it was a great result for Lyon. It was really positive that Depay had such a great game, but also defensively they were solid. Metz did have 2 or 3 chances. Lopez pulled off some good saves, and Lyon were clinical. I think it was 5 shots on target to 6, and Lyon scored 5 of them. So you can't complain with that. But even in that match, they Genesio tried a tactical switch and played a diamond in the middle, and Depay and Traoré out front together. That paid off. So we've seen before with Lyon how quickly it can change from positive to negative and back again. Similarly to Marseille, actually. But certainly, at the moment, they're on the up. It feels like they're on the up, and Marseille a little bit on the down.
Yeah, absolutely. They've sort of sprung up on them at the right moment, which seems a bit strange than thinking that they were gone. But again, I just wanted to circle back really to Memphis Depay, who did put in a really solid performance again. And it's just a shame that this seems to pop up every now and then, really, for the Dutchman. I remember that 4-goal performance in the first half of the season, and we thought this is the time to kick on. And he's had a good season, but at the same time, it's become moments where he's had to be dropped to the bench for a few games, and then he sort of sprung back into life. And this was an example of it. He was unselfish, 2 great corners for Marcelo's goals, a couple of nice little lay-ons for assists for Mariano Diaz and Bertrand Traoré as well, and takes his goal nicely as well. Him getting more involved in the game makes him such a better player. When he's trying to link up, when he's trying to be unselfish, he becomes such a better player, really.
You'll know better than us from seeing him for Man United as well. But I think that's been the issue with a few of Lyon's players, and certainly him and Diaz. There were times this season where it looked like they weren't speaking, they weren't doing anything, refusing to pass to each other. And I think there was an element of selfishness, but I think they both seem to have grown up quite a lot. I mean, Diaz has been sort of consistently scoring all through the season, but they both seem to have grown up. Diaz seemed to take quite well the fact that he was dropped to the bench this weekend and came back and came on and scored. And certainly they seem in a good place right now. And Depay's recent form, I've been as critical as anyone else about him because there's been so many matches, even the matches where he's sort of popped up and scored last minute winners, like the one against PSG. I think he came on during that match and was just horrific. But then, he can do something like what he did, 25-yard bullet into the top corner to win the match. And that's the frustration with him. But in the last few weeks, he's been a much more consistent. And, I don't think it's a coincidence that sort of coincides with Lyon's form changing.
That's where the cynical part of me thinks, and I'm going to probably be I hope I'm doing him a great disservice, but the cynical part of me thinks, is this now the time? Is he now thinking, well, now's the time. If I'm going to be playing very, very well, towards the end of the season, transfer window approaching, with his attitude where it is, in so much as he maintains that he is this absolutely world-class player, and the only thing that's stopping him is his own mind and his own attitude. Well, is it now telling him, well, come on then, Memphis, put in these performances now, because people are going to take note. Scouts will see, at the weekend, Memphis Depay got 4 assists and a goal, an amazing performance. Let's go and see him, in the next couple of games coming up. And I hope I'm wrong, and I hope I'm just showing my sort of worldly cynicism here, but to me, it strikes me that is very much a likely factor for his improved performances of late, especially the sort of things that he said, and said before, that he thinks that he is this. There's nothing separating him and Ronaldo, or him and Messi, or him and both of them, except his own mind and the way he thinks and behaves. Well, good on him for having that level of self-belief, but we know that can sometimes get taken away and carried away with him, to the point where performances like what we saw at the weekend become a rarity again. And as Jez says, he has to be dropped to the bench and learn his lesson and come back. So I'm hoping that this is a new lease of life for him, that he has a couple of years in France to really get back his game to the consistent, excellent level we know he can get to, and that this isn't just a blip of good performances to put him back in the shop window.
Yeah, that's what we'll have to wait and see, and hopefully he can end the season strong. Let's well, at least for many Lyons fans, will hope that their strike force can be a little bit more unselfish in this last part of the season. On to matters at the bottom of the table. Some interesting results. Obviously, we mentioned last week that none of those sides really are playing each other, but some big games for them nonetheless, and none bigger than for Amiens, who won 3-0 in a massive result against Caen. I mean, we said the week before that it was a big result, but this was emphatic, really, with a 3-0 victory that they absolutely 100% deserved against a Caen side that are slowly sinking into the position that Amiens was in. But after this one, Jez, with that 3-0 lead, with that 7-point gap now for Amiens, as they now sitting in 13th, above even Angers now, and Caen, with several teams below them that would have to sort of bypass them to get there. Are they safe?
As a Brighton fan, I mean, Mess, I've given up. As a Brighton fan, I'm an expert in working out whether teams around 35, 37 points are safe. And I think that they'll be fine if, I think they're fine even if they don't get another point the rest of the season, because there's no way that all those teams below them, the way they're playing at the moment, are gonna catch up. Lille, Troyes, Toulouse and Strasbourg, I think, could climb out of it, but Caen as well. I think Caen are looking awful at the moment, and are just very lucky that they massed some points earlier in the season, and that there's some other teams playing so badly. But I really, apart from the matches between each other, I can't see many of these teams picking up many more points. And it shows how quickly things can change. Just 2 straight wins, one against a direct rival, and they shoot up the table. But yeah, I think they're good. They're well worth their place, and I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, and terrific job they've done. I will mention it a lot more when they absolutely confirm it, because obviously there's plenty of weeks to go, and you never really know at the moment with this dogfight that's going at the bottom of the table. But they've been terrific. But as for Caen, Rich, they've slowly sleptwalked into their own sort of relegation battle. Now, obviously they are 6 points above that dreaded dotted line, at least Troyes, at the moment, but at the same time they've just slowly slipped into oblivion, really, is maybe the best way to put it. They had that win against Strasbourg a few weeks ago, which felt like probably just enough, but at the same time they start to lose heavily to teams around them, against Angers and Amiens. They've got games against other teams below them. The next 3 Ligue 1 games are Toulouse, Metz and Troyes. Maybe they've got an eye on that semi-final for the Coupe de France, even though it is against Paris Saint-Germain. But at the same time, you look at April, especially when May is Monaco, Nice and Paris Saint-Germain, which is an absolute firewalk for them, really, that they could really be in danger if teams start picking up points below them.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of April, we'll know whether Caen are out of here or not. Because if they don't pick up those necessary points in those 3 league games, again, all 3 are. Sorry, Jez, but Metz perhaps not a direct rival, but certainly Toulouse and Troyes are direct rivals to be staying up. If they haven't got those required points, and by required points, I'm saying they need to be winning at home to Toulouse, they need to probably be beating Metz, and they need to be avoiding defeat away at Troyes. If they don't come out of it with that, they're probably done for, because you just can't see them picking up a win at home to Monaco, away at Nice, at home to PSG. I can't. You could perhaps make an argument for a lucky draw maybe in one of those 3 games, but that's probably it to the extent that they'd get points from those last 3 games. So by the end of April, we'll know what Caen's situation is. I think maybe probably the case with a number of other teams as well, but Caen seems very clear cut because they have 3 games that they have to win, followed by 3 games that they probably don't think they will be able to get points from. So the game coming up at the weekend at home to Toulouse, without doubt, it's their biggest game of the season so far. If they don't come away with 3 points there, you automatically, I think, have to look at them as amongst one of the favourites to be going down. I think the only fortunate thing for them is they're at home to Toulouse. Toulouse themselves are in a pretty dire run of form themselves, and perhaps more worryingly, it seemed to be 1 or 2 games aside, but are really struggling to find the back of the net as well. So I think Caen can go into that game thinking, well, you know what, we know we can score. It may be only 1 or 2 players that we seem to be relying on to score, but they know they can. So that's the key game, because if they don't get all 3 points at home to Toulouse, they're in serious trouble.
Someone who is certainly in serious trouble, and it only really gets worse when you start looking at the games left for them and the games that's gone, and that's Troyes, who lost 4-0 at the weekend against Guingamp, but didn't really put up much of a fight. They've scored, as we mentioned in the news, just 1 goal in their last 7 games, which is astonishing. It was in that 1-1 draw against Amiens, the only point that they gained since that draw against Dijon, goalless draw back in February as well. But just looking at their games remaining, obviously there's 6 left. I'll let you be the judge of this. So it's away at Marseille, home to Saint-Etienne, away to Caen, away to Lyon, away to Montpellier, home to Monaco. It's looking very bleak. I mean, if you're Lille in that scenario, you're quite optimistic that at least Troyes might not really pick up another point and might not even score another goal for the rest of the season.
I still can see Lille getting out of this. I mean, if only because they've still got Metz to play as well. But Troyes look really in the doldrums, and you could say about a lot of the teams at the bottom. I mean, on recent form, certainly points-wise, I think Metz are possibly the most in form of the bottom 4 or 5, which tells you all you need to know about the form the other teams are in. Troyes, similarly to Caen, Caen actually haven't played great football all season. Troyes have at times, as is their sort of want over the last few years, but there just isn't enough quality in that team, I don't think. And Guingamp have hardly been in excellent form in recent weeks. They picked up their first win in quite a while last week, and they ripped Troyes apart. It's crazy that I don't think Metz are going to get out of it, but it's crazy that they're not further adrift. I don't think they've won for 8-9 matches, and they haven't really fallen further back in that time. And that again says something about the form of those above them. I do think that Lille have got the quality, and with Gaultier the nous to pick up a couple more points, and I can't see sort of more than a couple more points, couple more wins. But I can't really see where Troyes points are going to come from. I think they're in serious trouble. Caen at least have got that cushion, but Troyes don't have anything to play with.
Yeah, let me emphasise the point if it wasn't clear enough about Troyes so far, because looking further up, let's go back to the start of 2018. They've won 2 games in that spell. That's 12 Ligue 1 games, 2 wins, 2 draws, and every other game is a loss. They have scored 5 goals in those 12 games. They have an absolute nightmare finish to the season, really, as well, Rich. 2 sides that are fighting for third, one that's currently second, one that's fighting for fifth, and one of the best defences in Ligue, and a side that's on an absolute tear in Saint-Etienne, and even challenging Paris Saint-Germain last weekend. They've been in super form. The only team they maybe are looking at is Combe as maybe a possibility, but even then, that's not a guarantee with them being such a physical side as well. It's not completely out of the realms of possibility. They may not pick up another point this season.
You could make a very, very good argument for that. What I think you could also make an argument for is it may only take 1 win from those 6 games to be enough. It's a horrible, horrible run in, and they've got by far the hardest of all the teams down there. But if they can win that home game to Caen, if they can nick 1 or 2 points from their other games, 5 points, it could, it's so difficult to predict, but an additional 5 points, it genuinely could prove enough. Toulouse have got, I think Toulouse and Lille probably have the easier of the run-ins of the two of the teams down there. They're sort of playing a lot of teams who don't necessarily have much to play for. You look at Toulouse; they've got Angers. They look relatively safe. I think they'll have certainly by the time they're playing Toulouse, I think will probably have done enough to rid themselves of relegation worries. They've got Bordeaux, who by week 37 probably won't have a great deal to play for, and Guingamp likewise. So they've got 3 games there that are potentially winnable, because maybe the teams that they're up against aren't going to be fully at the races, and then they're playing Lille at home, Caen away. Win that Lille game, and again it's with 6 games left, we're down to a point now where just 1 win from those 6 games is going to could make a huge difference. So it's really difficult to predict. As much as I'd love to see Troyes do it with such a horrible run in, I don't think I could make a legitimate case that I would 100% believe in that they would stay up. So I think they're probably going to be looking to be going down with Metz, and then I don't know if I could predict that final spot for the relegation playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be a massive game in week 36 when Toulouse face Lille. That with 2 games after that game, that could probably really save one of them or eliminate the other, really. And I'm really fearing for Troyes. I genuinely think that they, barring a miracle, really, even if they do manage to win something against Caen, with the games that other teams around them have, I think they're possibly dead and buried, really. They're on an awful run of form, and they can't seem to score goals. They can't keep them out, and they're facing 6 teams really that are still competing for each other. The only one you could maybe argue on the end of at the end of that is Monaco on the final day of the season might not be playing for something, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure Monaco won't want to end their season with a defeat to a team that could be almost relegated. But we'll wait and see. We'll finish this week, and we'll skip our playing for Russia. We'll keep that for next week, and we'll go on to our Ligue 1 snapshots. And I'll start with you, Rich. What's your Ligue 1 snapshot for this week?
Mine's sort of more case of sheer on bad luck for Troyes in their game against Guingamp. Ball goes behind for a Troyes goal kick. They play it short. They look to break from defence. Behind the Troyes goal, the ball that had previously gone out of play is thrown onto the pitch by the Guingamp fans. Just as Guingamp get the ball off Troyes, break back towards the Troyes goal themselves, and with both balls in pretty close vicinity, for some reason, the referee allows them to play on, and Guingamp, I think it was their second goal, third goal of the evening. There's no way it should have been allowed. The other ball was well within the realms of interfering with play. A little bit cheeky, I think, from the Gangon fans, and it was a goal that really summed up just how unfortunate our season has been.
Jez, how about yourself?
My snapshot's not quite from the weekend, but from today. You mentioned Samba Diop, who the Lave kid who sadly passed away at the weekend. Lave had a pitch invasion recently, and the LFP have done their usual ruling that sort of until further notice, until decisions are made, Lave had to play sort of behind closed doors. The club asked the LFP to relax the ruling somehow, to allow Samba Diop's family to attend some kind of homage to the player at their next home match, and the LFP refused. I understand about making precedents that could cause problems in the future and all that kind of thing, but there's got to be some kind of common sense and a little bit of heart involved. And the LFP get a hell of a lot of criticism. I'm not sure it's always completely fair, but in this case, it just seems a ridiculously cold-hearted decision, and I hope that they somehow sort of reconsider.
Yeah, let's really hope so, because that's bureaucracy going a bit doolally, isn't it? Really,
Exactly,
that his family should absolutely be at that game. My snapshot goes to one player that we've mentioned a few times this season, but and it was in the Monaco game, really, that was a bit of a surprise, really, that Thomas Lemar was left out of the squad, but possibly because of his recent performances, really, and maybe they're maybe trying to shield him from the transfer window that's likely to happen to him in the summer. But at the same time, someone who has stepped up in his absence, really, and all season slowly has grown more and more influential, and that's Ronnie Lopez, who grabbed another goal and an assist at the weekend, although arguably the assist may be accidental towards Radamel Falcao for his first goal. But he's been terrific, the Portuguese man. We all thought that it was really, really big shoes to fill to try and replace Bernardo Silva. Probably even more difficult in that Monaco side than Kylian Mbappe, given how good the Portuguese man now at Man City was, and influential at cutting inside, in linking attacks, in creating things from that side. But fair play to Lopez. I always thought that it never felt like at Lille that, although that first season at loan before he actually joined Monaco permanently, that it felt like he might become something. And then there was a second loan spell and he didn't do great. There was a season back at Monaco and he wasn't really affecting enough. And this season he's come on leaps and bounds, and credit to him to get over the sort of criticism that a lot of people were throwing at him to become one of Monaco's most influential players now, and he scored a hatful of goals this season, and more than, like I say, in the news, more than anyone in Ligue in 2018, and more than anyone in the only Portuguese man in Europe to score more than him this season is the big man into Real Madrid in Cristiano Ronaldo. So hats off to him. He's been tremendous, and credit absolutely due to him. He's bound to be in the talks of in the team of the season and the like, and hopefully he can also go on and have a wonderful World Cup for his country as well. But that's all that we have time for this week. My thanks to Rich, Jez, and all of you listening at home this evening. Do join us for the preview show on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.